back home in Canada.
Yeah, I know.
Literally, like, it's
Oh.
perfect. It's literally out my door.
Here we are, and we're ready. My name's Devon Kershaw. Some of you guys might be wondering why it is an ex-cross-country skier is talking to you guys on bikes, getting ready for this ride that we're all going to do together. Well, I'm not going to do it because there's too many questions and too much stuff to figure out. But Mike, we're so stoked to have Michael Woods here with us. That's going to lead us on an awesome Zwift ride. Why are we all here? This is a ride. It's a fundraiser for HopOn Canada, which is Cycling Canada's new youth grassroots cycling initiative. It launched in 2020, late in 2020, and we're so fired up that everyone is here to join us. We're going to have a pretty casual conversation. I'm a cross-country skier. I was a cross-country skier. Now I'm just a tired dad that's going to school. So it's really fun to live vicariously through a professional cyclist like Mike, who's still drilling it. But the goal of the program is, the goal of HopOn Canada is to get 300,000 kids on bikes in the next 10 years. And the fact of the matter is, the more people that can be active, the more fun we can have in an active lifestyle. And the more we can be aware in Canada that we share the roads with cyclists and other people using that infrastructure, the safer and happier and healthier we all are. So really stoked to have you here, Mike. If people don't know who Michael Woods is, they've been living under a rock, and I'm sure if they're on a Zwift ride through this initiative, they know exactly who Michael Woods is. But of course, he's won stages in the Vuelta a España. He just switched teams to Israel Startup Nation, so I've got some great questions about that from Education First, or EF. He is a bronze medal at the World Championships a couple years ago. Of course, we're going to ask about that. But the main part of this is have an awesome ride, everybody, and we're just going to have a fun conversation. If you have any questions, put them in the comment section of on the live YouTube channel, or alternatively, you can use the Zwift chat app as well. And I'm wishing everybody a great ride. And Mike, thanks for being here, man. You're in Spain, I'm in Norway, and hopefully all these other people are riding in Canada. So how's it going in Spain right now?
Great, man. Great, Devin. Thanks for hosting this. It's nice here. Unfortunately, allergy seasons are in full swing, but it's beautiful. Sunny, 18 degrees today. Feels a bit odd being on a trainer at the moment, but I'm happy to be on it just for this cause, and also to joining everybody throughout the world. And I think that's also one of the special things about this platform is that, like you said, you're in Norway, I'm over here in Spain. We got so many people, I'm sure, joining in from Canada and other parts of the globe for this ride. So really special. And yeah, I'm on the trainer mainly, not just for this ride, but also to prepare for Volta Catalunya, my first World Tour race of the season. Starts tomorrow. Feels a bit odd that I'll be racing tomorrow, but going to be getting off the bike shortly after this ride, showering, jumping in a car, and going to the race hotel.
Oh, that's fun. That's awesome. How long is it? Are you in Girona right now?
Yeah, I'm in Girona at the moment. The race is 7 days. Starts Monday, so tomorrow. Tomorrow's kind of like a medium sprinters day, so it's going to be hard, but about 80 guys will probably survive to the line. After that, we've got 3 real general classification stages. We've got a time trial on Tuesday, not far from my house here. Wednesday, uphill finish on Volta 2000. Starts in Barcelona, goes all the way up into the Pyrenees. Volta 2000 is at 2,000 meters, so finishes at 2,000 meters. It'll be pretty challenging from an altitude perspective. And the next day is the Queen stage. We've got 3 or category climbs, really challenging ones, finishing off in the last one, which again finishes at 2,000 meters in this ski village called Portanet. It's a grueling climb, 18K. And yeah, it's gonna be a real test. Then just some hard stages after that, finally finishing in Barcelona on Sunday. So real test, and it's gonna be my first race with Chris Froome as a teammate. So I'm excited about that too. And yeah, it's gonna be just a cool week. I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, no, I'm so lucky. I have so many questions about this because I think I'm a super huge cycling dork. That's one major reason why I'm on this call too. The other reason is the CEO, the great CEO of Cycling Canada, is one of my best friends, Matt Jeffries. So it's just super great to be here. I'm an avid cyclist as well. I'm an avid runner. Like I said, I was a cross country skier, and that's still something that it's a huge passion of mine. I hope it is. I live in Norway, where people are born with cross country skis on their feet. But I wanted to ask you, so you've been struggling a little bit with bronchitis earlier in the season, and you've been mentioning that off air that like Tirreno Adriatico, for example, that was in your race plan and you had to make those changes. How is that as a professional athlete when, bronchitis, of course, I'm not saying it's a small illness necessarily, but you have to make changes so quickly and be on the fly. Like how is that as a professional cyclist when you have all these buildups, I'm assuming towards the major monuments, the Grand Tours, the World Championships, it's an Olympic season as well, we'll get back to, but also too, like you're such a beast in the Ardennes and those are coming pretty quick. So when you make those changes, how is that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think obviously all those things kind of play in the back of your head once the moment you wake up with a sore throat and start coughing, you start thinking of all your goals down the road and whether they're going to be compromised. And a younger version of myself would have certainly panicked. Even now, like an older version, like even now at 34, still part of you wants to panic and just keep on pushing despite the fact you're feeling this illness because you feel like you don't want your fitness to slide. And yeah, for me, I had that anxiety certainly in the first few days after getting sick, talking to the team. I was really hoping to do Tirreno, literally packed my bags, was ready to go. Woke up the morning at 7:30, felt terrible, was supposed to meet the team at 8:30 to leave. And after a few calls with my directors, we just decided it was better to think long-term. And we pulled the plug on racing. Yeah. And it was the right move. Like now I'm feeling much better. Still have a bit of gunk in the lungs, but overall my health's way better. I'm glad I pulled out, especially after watching Tirreno. It looked like there was one day particularly that was just savage, super wet, super cold. Savage. And that probably would have buried me if I'd done it. So going into this race, I'm hoping that I can get over the illness, make a full recovery and use this as a good launch pad for the rest of the season.
Speaking of launching pad, that's great. You said that, Mike. In under 2 minutes, the official ride is going to start. Mike's smashing some Ks a little early to get warm up for this 27 and a 27K and change challenge. But for everyone else that's been waiting and wanting to get really just not spend any energy before you have to, that first pedal stroke, that's happening in like a minute and a half now. So stay tuned, guys. We're going to go to the Swift View pretty soon. And here's everybody at the start line. So cool to see everybody virtually. This is one of the it is a kind of a beautiful thing, even though we are living through this pandemic, which is weird. But like Mike was saying, we wouldn't be able to gather so many people all together and have a chat like this, even really like a couple years ago. I mean, Mike's a younger man than I am, but wasn't that long ago that this was like this was something in an Inspector Gadget cartoon when you're 6. People are talking on their phones and you're seeing a video. You're like, this is not real life. This will never happen. And now here we are all joined together and about to start this ride in under a minute. So that is pretty awesome. So, but about that, like coming back to that challenging with illness, like that is something I remember my career too, is always just such a challenge mentally. I mean, and it's hard to make those right decisions. I mean, Lord knows, I mean, you probably have a lot of stories about making the wrong side of that decision and letting your motivation get the better of you. And totally. I've had that too. And I mean, you got to be smart, and that's great that you have a good team. Because the other question building on that is like, of course, like you were with Wouters for many, many years, especially coming up into the world tour level from Optum Kelly Benefits up with Wouters on it, going through a whole bunch of iterations. But now this is your first year with Israel Startup Nation. And was that at all anything that played in your mind? Like you had this, of course, best laid plans. And then all of a sudden, like you said, you have to make changes, which is, of course, the best decision. And it's great. It sounds like your director sportifs and your support staff support you on that. But how is that in professional cycling? Is that something that is worrisome, or you guys you've worked out that relationship so long in advance of the season anyway?
Yeah, no, good question. Yeah, and I know you can relate to this a lot. I know cross-country skiers are always battling with illness just because of the weather. It's just because of how cold it is. Yeah, it's the same with us. Like, we just, especially in the winter, you're subjecting yourself to quite extreme temperatures, extreme elevation change, and all that, plays into the opportunity to get sick. And like amidst a global pandemic, you're constantly thinking of just trying to stay healthy. But coming over to ISN has been a real nice for me, just because I had a great relationship with EF, great relationship with JV and the team, and I was happy at that team. But going over to ISM was really a decision that was more right around about being family almost. Sylvan Adams, the owner of the team, he's the guy, one of the reasons why I'm a pro cyclist today. Same with Paul Sedana, the head of performance. He's been my coach since 2013. And these two guys are really two of the guys that I owe my entire pro cycling career to. They believed in me early on. And because of that, that faith and that belief in me is really translated into how I felt coming into the team. Hasn't really felt like I've come to a new team. It feels like this is just another year on the same team.
Oh, that's cool.
Also, with the riders, I'm friends with a lot of these guys. I've raced them, but also been teammates with quite a few of them. So the transition has been super nice. And that has actually helped in taking some of the pressure off of feeling stressed about getting ready for the race because of my illness. And I think it also reflected in how I kicked off the season. Although it wasn't the biggest race in the world, the competition was super high. Some of the best riders in the world were there at Ovar in mid-February, and I almost won the overall.
Yeah, you were beefy. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that was a real reflection of the faith and the confidence that the team has in me, and how excited I am to be on the team.
And speaking of building on that too, because you're coming into a new team, and I know with me, I mean, cross country skiing, of course, is a national team program. That's how it's based around. It's not set up like professional cycling, of course, or even running or anything like that. But that said, there is teammates and people that you train with that have different strengths, and you can learn a ton from. And it changes. Sometimes you're the mentor, sometimes you're the mentee, but you can always, if you have a good relationship and you have a good team, you're able to work together so well. And you mentioned it a couple minutes ago, and you're coming to the team with one of the best Grand Tour riders ever, with Chris Froome, and you can learn so much from him. And of course, I know everyone riding on Zwift with us right now knows this already about Woodsy, but you're a beast in the Ardennes, and being a teammate with someone like Dan Martin that's won Liège and is always in great shape for the Ardennes every single year. That must be thrilling as well. Not like guys like Rigoberto Urán were slouches in the GC and some of the other guys you were training with and racing with at EF. But still, I mean, you have, two races that I think suit your strengths. And that's one of the listener questions that's one of the questions that we got. And I wanted to build on that. The first question is will you ever train to win a Grand Tour? And if so, you're now joining a team with someone like Chris Froome that, we have to say it, it's just the reality of life. We all get older, and Froome is in the twilight of his career, but he has such a breadth of experience, and that must be thrilling to even have conversations and train with him. Have you ever thought about that?
Yeah, I think that was one of the allures of coming over to the team, particularly after Chris had made the decision to sign. And even with just a lesser character, but hard to say lesser, Dan Martin, both are champions in their own right. Chris obviously being the greatest GC rider of his generation, and Dan being a guy who's won an Ardennes Classic. He's won Liège-Bastogne-Liège. So being able to tap into the wealth of knowledge that these two guys have is something that really excites me. I'm racing with them this week, and I'm excited to just pick their brains, try and learn from them as much as possible. And yeah, I think they're going to push me to raise my game. And as you mentioned, on EF, we did have some great riders. We had a guy like Rigoberto Urán. But these guys have just won more races at the highest level. And that's where I want to be. That's one of my goals. And it'll be great to learn from them. But as you mentioned, targeting more of a general classification, that's certainly not in the works for this year. I think the big goal for me this year, I'm all in for the Olympic Games. All in on focusing for one-day classics and chasing individual stages. The biggest hurdle for me as a GC rider is my time trial. It's weak. I'm terrible at it. Some of that has to do with just physiological limits. Coming into the sport late as a runner, I'm used to producing power upright in a standing position as opposed to an aerodynamic seated position. And we've worked, Paul and I, on that quite a bit, but I still have a long way to go. So much so that it'd be difficult to invest myself fully into a GC run knowing that. But I think next year, after the Olympics are over, for me, the big goal is going to be to see what I can do in other facets of the sport, particularly from a GC perspective. So I think in 2022, the big goal will be targeting something like the Vuelta a España.
Oh, that's cool. And the Vuelta is a perfect first step for that as well. Not just first step. You've had success in the Vuelta, winning stages, of course. But I mean, the Vuelta is known for just those absolute beastly climbs where you have.
That's one of the reasons.
Yeah,
it's certainly one of the reasons why I've had success there. And even I've had a 7th overall in the general classification there in 2017. And the climbs are extremely challenging, but they're also short, which plays into the standing, as I'm doing right now, power that I produce, as opposed to that aerodynamic seated position.
Going way back, so one of your early GC successes, and really like, okay, again, I'm a Nordic skier, guys, so don't flood me with the hate mail, but I remember this happening because I am a huge cycling dork and I follow it super closely. But in 2015, when you were riding Pro Continental, you finished 2nd in the Tour of Utah. And the Tour of Utah is high altitude, really tough climbs, long, tough climbing sections. And I mean, I've roller skied up a lot of those passes that the Tour of Utah goes over. Not every year, of course, the course changes every single year, but a lot of those classic passes are places that I've done tons of workouts on roller skis, actually. And what a coming out for you as a Pro Continental racer to come into the Tour of Utah, where you have some, at that time it was called Pro Tour teams also in the field, and finishing 2nd. And that, I think, is probably why, like, some of the people on this ride that have been asking about your GC general classification goals in the future, because how did that feel for you? I mean, you had been riding for a couple years, of course. I mean, you were on Kelly Optimum Benefits, which is like one of the better Pro Continental teams, or was the best Pro Continental team at that time. But were you shocked that you finished 2nd in that Tour of Utah in 2015 that kind of launched that that kind of put you on the map, so to speak? Or were you prepared and you knew it, you saw the course profiles, you know those roads, and you're like, this is built for me?
Yeah, I think Tour of Utah was a really special weekend for me. I was on Optum at the time. Actually, we weren't even Pro Conti at that time. We were only Continental, so even 1 tier lower.
Really? Okay.
And,
yeah. I didn't know that.
And going up against World Tour teams, you're always super nervous. You're not sure how you're going to stack up. And at that point in my career, I'd set the bar lower for my expectations, for my goals, because I just wasn't sure how far I could go in the sport. And my big goal was to just try and land a contract where I could make a living wage for a couple of years. And so I felt like in signing with Optum, I'd done that. All of a sudden I could make a livable wage and say I was a pro athlete, and it was wonderful. And the bar was set. And I felt like I'd almost achieved the goals, because when I first started, even that seemed wild. This idea of, because I started when I was 25, the idea of, being able to be a guy who makes a living out of cycling. But once I got there on Optum, the team really believed in me. And right off the bat at camp, I was just flying. And as we progressed through the year, I had some really nice results, had some wins, even a win over in Europe and Portugal. And then I finished in the top 10 on a stage against at Volta Algarve, which is a stage race in Portugal in the Algarve region. Finished 5th, I believe, on a mountaintop finish against some of the best riders in the world. Geraint Thomas, Mikhail Kwiatkowski, Richie Porte, just to name a few. Davide Formolo, several others. And it was a really strong field. And I think that started putting me on the map for other teams. But the real big result was, like you said, finishing 2nd in Utah that year. I think that kind of cemented my position in the World Tour after that. JV was super keen on signing me. I surprised myself even the day I won and took yellow. Just had one of those days where I was on form. And in retrospect, the course was just tailor-made for me. It was not finishing on a big mountaintop, but a climb that was 2K long, super steep. I just paced it perfectly, hit him over the top, and won the race. It was lovely. It was a great memory for me.
Oh, that's yeah. It must have been. You mentioned you came into the sport late, and I know everyone on this Swift ride knows, like I said, that you guys all know Woodsy Story, and I do too, because I'm a mega dork and loving it. But like, for me, what I think is so impressive and interesting is because, like, well, you were a runner at a way higher level than I was, and you took it way longer than I did. But you made a decision that I struggled with personally. Like, it was really hard for me to decide whether I was going to go the NCAA route in running or pick skiing. And man, it was a really tough decision for me to know what to do. Those that live in Ontario and have heard of OFSA track and field or OFSA cross country running, it's the provincial championships for high school sports in the sport of running. And it actually is like, when you're there and you're a kid, and it feels like a pretty big deal. And like, I know you ran OTFAs and national championships and as well like that, but at least for me, like OFSA just seemed like way bigger deal than OTFAs, let's say. Like the
I've done the Olympics, I've done the World Championships, and I've never been more nervous.
Me too.
For an OFSA championships.
Oh, dude, yeah, like that start pen, when you're in that start pen in OFSA cross country and you're like sandwiched in like cattle, and you look to your left and your right, like maybe there's some older people also riding like this, but I felt like I was like in a Braveheart scene. Like, I'm like, oh my God, like it's happening. So I know those nerves well. But so you decided to run at the powerhouse at the time, University of Michigan, especially in the middle distance events. People that don't know, Woodsy here is the mile and 3,000 meter Canadian record holder still, even with all these super spikes that are happening all over the place. They haven't beat Woodsy's PBs from back in the days. And so your first love and you were chasing big time because you are an OFSA champion, of course. And you decided to go to the University of Michigan. I had some friends, a fellow guy from Sudbury, Andrew Ellerton, who is an NCAA champion, the 800, and then Nate Brennan, who is my nemesis when I was running together with him. He would always beat me. I would always do the work and drop the field, and Nate would be on my shoulder. And no matter how hard I tried, I never won any OFSA anything. I was second a bunch of times because Nate would just blow the doors off me. But Nate Brennan, for those that don't know, is probably Canada's, you have Kevin Sullivan. There's a lot of names, but Nate Brennan is definitely one of Canada's best ever 1,500 meter runners. And you decided to follow him for, if we can say that, to University of Michigan, which was a powerhouse. And how was that? Like, how was that transition coming from Ottawa Lions Track Club and moving to the University of Michigan? And I don't know him, so I have some questions about this, but like Ron Warhurst, hearing from Nate back in the days, like he sounded like a real hard man. And how was that transition? Because that was like really your first transition into quote unquote professional sport. I know it's not professional, but NCAA running at that level it's the highest level there is outside of actual Diamond League or professional running circles.
Yeah, it's a real transition into the professional sports world. That's why track and field, and particularly in the NCAA, is one of the most competitive disciplines. If you can win in an NCAA championship, you've got an outside shot at medaling at a world championship. You've got an outside shot at least finishing top 5. It's a real accomplishment to have success in the NCAA because it's just so well funded, and most other areas of the sport aren't. So a lot of people go over there with high hopes, and you do feel like a professional athlete because you go over there, and the support and the money behind you is incredible. I mean, I had to do a state tuition for me at Michigan at the time. It's close to $50,000 per year. They're paying for that, your books, all your flights, all your travel, all your food, your housing. And certainly you feel that pressure too, but I loved it initially. And I loved that's the reason why I chose to go to that school, is because it was at the time the best miling school in the world. We had a guy named Nick Willis who finished second in the Olympics. Nate Brandon was there at the time, and Nate was the best miler in Canada at that time. Also, alma mater of Kevin Sullivan, the greatest middle distance runner in Canadian history. And for all those reasons, yeah, and even your friend Andrew Ellerton, solid runner. My first year, I was teammates with him, and we broke the the world NCAA 4-mile record at the race. At the Penn Relays. So it was just a really solid group of runners, and that's why I went there. But I struggled too. Like, I had initial success that quickly faded away due to overtraining. Ron was a great motivator and a great person, but he wasn't the most scientific coach. And I think he made some bad decisions. I made some bad decisions. And ultimately, by the end of my career at Michigan, I had several injuries, one of which a stress fracture to my navicular would ultimately put me out of the sport.
Yeah, and I think that is really interesting for people, because like that was something, like I said, like it was something, NCAA running was definitely something I was strongly considering. but that like the win at all cost, or that high pressure, that's, of course, you're a professional athlete. I was a professional athlete. You kind of feed off that. You want that. You want to be in that environment. But it is interesting to hear what you like, the way you're describing Israel Startup Nation now, like of having that good support staff, and how important it is to have those support staff that look after your long-term goals, and looking at goals even for a season to make the right decisions. And in NCAA, there is definitely like a lot of horror stories where young athletes go, and for better or worse, the coaches have maybe programs that are just too big to follow close enough up with all these athletes. And everyone is a type A. Everyone is going to a school, especially Michigan or something. They're going there to like as a launching pad to get to the Olympics. And a guy like Nate or you at that time, getting to the Olympics isn't enough. You want to reign in the final. And then if you're running in the Olympic final in the 1500 meters, anything's possible, like you've said. And Nick Willis is a great example. I mean, Alan Webb, who was before your time, I mean, his season in 2007 was like probably the greatest 1500 meters. Centrowitz is the Olympic champion of 1500 meters now, but it was at the time anyways, it was one of the best seasons.
It's incredible
for a 1500 meter runner ever for an American. So I understand that, but can you contrast that a little bit? Because you say NCAA, it feels like you're a professional, but now you are a professional athlete with a professional team. And that must be quite the gap. There still must be a sizable gap. It's like, wow, I felt like a professional at 18, 19 years old, but we didn't have things tight like you have as a professional cyclist. Is it just budget?
Yeah.
What is it?
I mean, in some ways, like it's a tough thing to compare, because I was running from 2004 to 2008 at Michigan, and our understanding of how to train, our understanding of how we support athletes, nutrition, everything has dramatically changed. I reflect back on my time in Michigan and think just how we did things. I know now in the NCAA, it's much different. And that's also reflected in how fast guys are going in the NCAA right now.
Yeah.
They're going much faster. Like,
of course. Yeah, of course.
My best times used to rank me as one of the best runners in the NCAA. And now I'd be struggling to make standard. And so I think, had I come in later on, it would have been, I might have been different. And obviously I don't regret that, because I am where I am. But it's hard to make that comparison because of just the knowledge we now have in 2021. That being said, like since I started working with Paulo Saldana, my coach, who's also the head of performance at Israel Startup Nation, I've been blown away by not just his knowledge, but his ability to create a support network around his athletes, and taking this holistic approach to training, taking a step back and looking at perspective and having a perspective of what the end goal is, what the intermediate goals are, and where the athlete currently is. It is his ability to do that has been amazing. And I'm a reflection of that. My success in the sport's a reflection of that. And coming over to ISN, you see a lot of that. I mean, the team is highly professionalized. Some ways it's worse off compared to an NCAA institution. You go to an NCAA institution and the actual infrastructure is second to none. You have access to the best technology and machines and you name it. It's incredible the money that's pumped into it, predominantly as a trickle off from the football programs. But on the other hand, the funding, the marketing, and the travel budget behind our team is not insignificant either.
Yeah, of course.
And obviously the wages are substantially higher. There aren't really any wages in NCAA, excluding the actual scholarship. But there's some things that we're just so far ahead of when it comes to nutrition, for example, how dialed we are with our nutritionists, with our nutrition plans, how dialed we are with our training. And again, it's hard for me to compare the NCAA from a training perspective, because in cycling, you have this power meter.
Yeah, exactly. And you know where you are.
You know where you are.
Or no, exactly.
In running, you have the track, which is quite objective, but you don't have the coach being able to pour over all of the data like you can in cycling. And the data that our team compiles and talks about with 4, 5, 6 other performance directors, it's pretty amazing. And what they can build off of that is pretty incredible. You feel like almost a business. You almost feel like this is like they've taken Moneyball to cycling, and it's that's not, I'm not unique in that. This team's not unique in that sense. Like, it was really driven by Ineos initially, but it's an arms race and every team has to play catch up. And that's why now you're just seeing these incredible times and the peloton getting faster and faster. It's because our understanding of the data, our understanding of the training is just increased substantially from even when I first started running.
So if we're talking, and that's a great segue, because now we're talking about like the absolute elite, highest level of cycling, and we're all out here on a bike ride except me sitting here in Norway. But but like pivoting back to like grassroots, like, can you talk a little bit? Like, I mean, we both grew up in Ontario. I grew up in Northern Ontario. You grew up in, well, what would we call that? Like, I guess like Southeast, almost like Eastern Ontario. But regardless, what did grassroots mean to you? Because like here, we're all joined together here for HopOn Canada, Cycling Canada's grassroots cycling program that they want to create. And why is this important? Like, why is it important to get kids on bikes? Because you know what? Yes, it's cool talking about these war stories about pro cycling or running in track and field in the NCAA. That's what, of course, I'm a dork. So it's really awesome. But like, more important than that, and this is what I see here in Norway for sure, and this is like staggering in Norway, but it's like this idea of a healthy lifestyle or being out, just being out in nature, running around. Like, it's crazy on the weekends. Like, today is Sunday. I was out skiing with my family. I have a daughter who's 4 and a young daughter who's just over 1. And it's like dogs, grandmothers, kids, like everybody. It's just like everybody's outside all day long. And really, like, that's a culture that Norway is, well, that's what puts them at the best in winter sport on earth, no question. And I think it's a cool initiative, this HopOn Canada initiative that Cycling Canada is doing to build a grassroots program. Because like the more people that are out there having fun on bikes, maybe they can be inspired by you. I'm inspired by you, and I know there's a lot of people are as well. But even if there's some kids that like go through programs like this and then don't end up racing and don't end up doing anything like that, but on Sundays they go out with their families and spend times outside on their bikes, cruising around. Like, what was your experience growing up with grassroots sport? Obviously, it wasn't cycling necessarily, especially with your background in running, but can you touch a little bit on your grassroots experiences?
Yeah, I think that comes down to one of the reasons why I want to support this cause is I want to have create a culture where people are keen to just go out and get in a bike, but just not just ride, but do vigorous aerobic activity on a regular basis. I think it's so important for society, for people, for everything, that people are getting out and moving. I reflect, back on when I was a kid, and I was so fortunate to have great parents that put me in every sport under the sun.
Yeah.
Didn't matter if I expressed any type of interest in anything, they just chucked me in. And had I not had that, I know for sure I would not be in the position that I'm in today. I for sure would have been probably I probably would have been an unhappy person. Probably not doing something I loved, and probably doing something that was not productive for society. Who knows? But as a kid, I was a terrible student. I had terrible attention issues, and I struggled in school. I was almost held back a year, but my parents realized that it wasn't an intelligence issue. It was an attention issue, because I just had so much energy. And to throw me in the classroom and sit me down for hours on end was the worst thing you could do to a guy who would ultimately go on to have like a 95 VO2 max.
Yeah.
It's like the worst thing you can do.
Yeah.
So,
sure.
So once I started running, I started experiencing this real calmness in my mind. And I went from being a terrible student to an exceptional, but doing well in school, well enough to finish on the honors list and actually be productive in school and actually justify my place at university, despite I got going there on an athletic scholarship. So it's why I'm really a believer in HopOn. It's why I want to create more access to kids uh, more access to bikes for kids. And yeah, obviously one of the goals is, who knows, maybe you have a kid in that program that turns out to be someone who can take me down in a few years, but like really my big goal is to not focus on creating the best cyclists in the world, but just a better society.
Yeah,
making
totally.
Things less intimidating and making endurance sport just more fun and more attractive.
Yeah, and I think it's just such an amazing goal and such an amazing program that Cycling Canada is now putting resources and energy into building something like this. Because like with myself too, like my outreach program, I mean, I'm coming from cross country skiing. I had a very similar upbringing to you. It sounds like hockey. Like I was for sure going to be captain of the Montreal Canadiens. It was going to be awesome. Yeah. It was going to be great. I didn't quite work out. I'm not the biggest guy in the world, but yeah, I also was able to just join so many different sports. Like I played tennis, I ran track and field and cross country running. I did bike races. I cross country skied, like I alpine skied, like did everything under the sun. And you're right, like having access to and being out and being active with your buddies, there's nothing better. And I mean, I don't know if you have memories of that, but like some of my like most important club teammates I've ever had, like they probably had, you said you have VO2 max of 95, they probably had a VO2 max of like 35. Like they had like zero talent whatsoever, but they were stoked, they worked hard, we joked around, we had a great time together. And as you get older, as you get out of that grassroots programming, like when I think grassroots, I'm thinking like, kids, right? But like when you're like 13, 14 and you're traveling for the first time to like an Ontario Cup or a small competition with the club, it takes a community, it takes a real community. And if everybody's acting like a professional world tour rider at the age of 13, that's not going to help society as much as what you're saying. And I think it is cool. And then also too with cycling, the importance is the more kids we can get on bikes, the healthier and better society is, no question. That's a given. But also too, you have like, and I don't want to get hate mail all over the place, but like from a climate perspective, if more people are on bikes, more people, maybe we can push the needle in Canada a little bit further that it needs to go with more cycling friendly initiatives. It's more people can commute on bikes to school, to work in a safe environment. People are more confident on their bikes. Drivers are more used to people being on bikes. There's just so many residual benefits. So I think it's the timing's right and needed. And I think it's Canada has a long way to go. I'm sorry to say, but like with these kind of stuff, they have a long way to go, especially compared to where I live here in Norway. And it's cool that there's initiatives coming like this.
Yeah, no, I think that's like you summarized it in a great way. I was, like I said, really lucky to have great parents. And upon reflection, we weren't wealthy, but they were, strongly middle class, and they had enough disposable time to get me to the practices and the games and everything like that. But had they not had that, I know that I wouldn't have benefited from all these activities, because the access is less. Access is so focused, particularly in my mind, on hockey, on sports that are actually relatively inaccessible. And where the focus needs to be placed from a funding perspective, in my mind, is on super accessible sports like cycling, where aside from the cost of the bike, it's just free. And when you focus on that and then make it unintimidating to a wide swath of people via education, via access, via good bike infrastructure, then you're going to have a much healthier society, and the costs, the benefits of it are just going to be profound. So, I mean, that's why I'm putting so much emphasis on this. That's why I'm proud to be a part of it. Yeah, and I'm really hoping we can get as many kids on bikes as possible. 300,000 kids is the goal, and it'd be amazing. It'd be amazing for it to happen.
Yeah, and I think it can be done, especially like this is like it's something that we all, I mean, that feeling of freedom, like the feeling of freedom, man. Like I remember learning, I don't know, it's probably like just lore now. Now it's probably just family lore. But I want to pretend that I remember the feeling of learning to bike. And then I most certainly remember as a young kid having my bike and like telling my parents like, peace, I'm going to Ben's house and jumping on my bike and the freedom that gives you.
Oh,
And,
yeah, the liberty.
Oh, the liberty is just phenomenal. And then, like, I wasn't thinking about being a professional athlete whatsoever. That was like the furthest from my mind. But that feeling of liberty and freedom and the wind in your ears under your helmet like that, like it's a beautiful sport. And 300 kids on bikes, we can do this. I believe we all, this is the start of it. Of course, it's been going on for years and years and years with the provincial cycling federations, and then passionate people like you said with Paolo. But even before that, I mean, you came into cycling after being like injured, like you said, like your track career was it was game over, and you came into the sport that way, and then had good support staff and good people around you. But in communities all across Canada, there's just such great volunteers and passionate people that are going to help out with this initiative and have been doing it for many, many years already. So it's not to say that we haven't been doing it, but it's nice to see a bit more clout and see if we can move the needle a little more. I think it's fantastic.
Totally.
So
I think also going back to my parents and just being lucky too. One thing I want to aim for with HopOn particularly is the intimidation factor. I was lucky to have a lot of confidence when I came on board, but there is this culture within cycling that is quite intimidating.
Yeah,
it's all about having the right bike, having the right gear, and that's not necessarily the case. Like what the goal should be to be as inclusive as possible. And that's one thing
totally
I did love about running is when I joined my first running club, there wasn't that. It was more acceptance, more excitement that I was just being there.
Yeah.
And I think that's also a goal of mine within this whole movement is to increase the level of excitement for just people participating.
Yeah, totally. And that's what I
not knocking them for their sock length or their bib shorts.
Yeah, for sure. No, that's a totally good point. Before we move on, I want to take a quick second just to thank Lexus Canada, because of course it takes a community to build a program like HopOn Canada. Lexus is on board as a major sponsor, which is fantastic. It's great to have a global brand back something like this. I think it's so super important to have corporate support. It's also really important that Mike donates his time and energy for a program like this, and everyone else that does that, and also the people riding and donating. But this is something that, you know what, we're not going to make this an infomercial. This is an informal chat, but it is great to support programs like this, and it does take resources. It just does. So thanks to everybody that are contributing to this financially and also with their time and energy, all the volunteers across the country, and Lexus most certainly. Here's a couple softball questions, but we got a lot of questions about language. And you live in Girona, so now you're starting Catalunya tomorrow. Have you learned any Spanish, or more specifically Catalunian? Because like anyone that's traveled to Spain and been around Spain, you can't compare how they speak in Madrid to how they speak in Barcelona or Girona for that matter. So have you picked up any languages in your travels? We got a lot of questions coming in about that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, so I'm actually a resident, and my home country at the moment is Andorra, which is just sandwiched between France and Spain, pretty close to where I am right now in Girona. My family and I would come down here to Girona in the winters just to beat the snow up in the mountains up in Andorra. But Andorra is the only country in the world where the official language is Catalan. And obviously in Catalonia, the main language is Catalan. And I think it's actually one of the things that's kind of held me back from learning Espanol, from learning Spanish, because when I'm here, people either speak Catalan or they speak English. And they're not too keen on speaking Spanish. They'll call it Castellano. However, this year I have made a concerted effort to learn Spanish, particularly because my daughter, who sounds like she's right around the same age as your youngest, is going to school. She's probably speaks Catalan and Spanish now, or understands it better than she does English. And so it's embarrassing to me that I can't communicate with her as well as the people at the daycare. So I'm working on that. My Spanish has improved dramatically, so much so that, now I can carry a very bad conversation. I do speak French fluently. That's obviously coming from Canada and also riding for a French Quebec-based team when I first started out. and having a French roommate when I was at University of Michigan. So my French is strong.
Oh, that's
Spanish is coming along, but Catalan, I'm pretty weak, and it's definitely not Mold Bay, as they say, which is very good.
Yeah, no, exactly. It's just like that list that they got going there. Like it's tough to have that totally dialed in.
Yeah.
No question. But it is funny what you said about that too. Like, I mean, I also grew up Sudbury, Ontario is a city in Northern Ontario that's like has a huge Francophone population. So I grew up speaking French as well, growing up, and then moving over here to Norway, and then realizing like, okay, now I have a kid and I'm living in Europe and I better figure this out. But you're absolutely right. Nothing motivates you more than the kids, like your own kid speaking or like about to learn speak another language, and you don't have good control on it. Like that lights a fire under your chair in a big way to be like, okay, I really got to get this dialed in. But I don't know if you had that experience. Catalonia, like you said, it's totally different or not totally different, but it is different than Spanish, of course. But Spanish and French is a little closer than Norwegian and French.
Yeah, big time.
But I do think when it was a gift, that's another gift I had. We share that together, is like being able to speak 2 languages as a kid. I don't remember learning French. And I think the fact that I learned French as a kid made learning Norwegian that much easier.
Oh, certainly. Not when you start learning one language, it makes it easier to pick up another. And I find the more I work on my Spanish, interestingly, the better my French gets. I think just because my brain's being more switched on. So it's a nice process. I'm really lucky to be going through right now.
Nice. And another question that we got, like, cause that was a big one. So the language was like a question that we got like bombarded with. The other question that we got bombarded with, I think is a good one too, is like, do you have a favorite race course? Like, is there a race that just means that much to you? I know you've said like GC. I know the Tour de France, of course, means everything to like any professional rider, and that must have been a wonderful experience to get to compete in that. But like, is there a course, or it could be a stage, but like, is there a race that really like speaks to you? Like, I mean, right now in the World Tour, because that we've got a lot of questions that are essentially worded the same. But I was curious about that too, because I had that in skiing. So it'd be interesting to hear your perspective from professional cycling.
Yeah, there's the Ardennes Classics clearly are the ones suited best to me, particularly Liège-Bastogne-Liège.
Yeah,
I've just had success there. My first year, I broke my hand in the race, but then every other year, I finished in the top 10. I love that race. I don't know if it's my favorite race, but it's certainly my favorite race course. Tour is up there certainly for being one of my favorites. I also like this one course called one race called the San Sebastian Classic.
Oh yeah,
it's an amazing one in the Basque Country.
Sebastian's awesome.
And finally, there's some Italian semi-classics. I love Lombardia, but one of my faves is actually a race called GP Emilia. It takes place several circuits within the city, within Italy, near Bologna. Grueling finishing climb, short. It's tailor-made for me. I've never won it. I came second to Primoz Roglic on it 2 years ago, but it's a sweet course. I love it.
And any favorite training camp location? That's another question we've been getting a lot in.
Yeah, I'd say
training camp.
I'd say Girona. Easily Girona. I mean, there's a lot of great places to ride in the world. People get really excited by France and Italy. I do find both places to be nice destinations to ride, but the traffic is not great. Less so in France. Italy's the worst for traffic. Everyone gets really excited about Italy, about training, and it's cool, but there's so much traffic, and then the drivers are quite dangerous. Whereas Girona, you have access to the Pyrenees. You can go out, ride to the coast, but it's the traffic that's exceptional. When you ride around here, everyone passes, smiles, waves. You never get buzzed. People often just wait. Sometimes you look behind you and there's a line of cars behind you. They haven't even honked. They're just waiting. It's shocking to the system when I go back to Canada or ride elsewhere, because I've been lulled into this sense of complete safety on the road. Yeah. And you feel like you're riding on a closed road all the time. And then you go to Canada, I go back home and it feels like I'm at war.
Exactly. And that's why we do need to get more kids on bikes, more families on bikes, and more people understanding that, like, and this is a super important thing to me. I had a rough experience when I was growing up, losing someone I loved to a crash. So safe roads and sharing the road with other people is super important. but not to get grim, but have you ever ridden in the Priorat region of Spain?
Of Spain,
Priorat. So if you drive south, it's like you drive south to Barcelona till you get to like Tarragona, and then you turn right, and it's a wine region up in there. It's
I think I'll actually be there on stage. I'm gonna say I'll be close to there in a few days, actually.
No way,
I
cool.
think. Yeah.
The Priorat region, like it's funny what you say describing about Girona. I've never done any riding around Girona, but I did about a week of riding. That used to be something I used to do as a skier. It was super fun, like in late April before my season kind of kicked off, but I needed to get some like base miles. I'd be in Europe and do a week or 10 days of road riding in like either the south of France, or I was in Tuscany once and in Spain, around Harrow, and then this place, the Priorat region, which is like, there was nobody at all. Like it was crazy. Yeah. Awesome. Like
Spain in general. I think a lot of it has to do with just the mentality here. People are just less stressed.
Yeah.
They're less in a rush. Yeah. And therefore they give you time on the road.
Exactly. Oh, that's great. Well, Mike finished, which is great. Good job. So we've got to wrap this thing up. But it's been an awesome conversation. Before we do that, I do want to give a quick shout out to all the provincial cycling organizations. We talked a little bit about it earlier in our chat. It's great. The HopOn Canada, getting kids on bikes. That's the grassroots programming is obviously the goal and super important, but without the provincial cycling federations on board and really being there to make like the rubber meets the road with all these programs, it wouldn't work. So it does take a community like we've been talking about. So shout out to all the provincial cycling federation or cycling organizations that bought into this initiative as well and are going to help keep it running. I could talk to you for like forever, of course, because I didn't even get into like being able to talk about Jakob Ingebrigtsen, who is a young Norwegian 200-meter runner, who's like a total beast. And I'm a huge cycling dork, and I've been a huge cycling fan and dork for my whole life. So there's a lot more questions out there. So we'll have to do another Swift ride some other time. So there's lots more material to get going. But for now, Tour of Catalunya is right around the corner. I want to thank you, Mike, so much. I want to thank Lexus Canada. And I want to thank everyone else for participating in this ride. I think it's been a wonderful initiative, and this is great. Also, really special thanks to Haley Smith, who co-hosted this event. It takes a village to get to where we want to go. And Haley, thanks so much for being a huge part of this event. And thanks, Cycling Canada. Good luck, Mike. We're going to be cheering super hard. Super stoked to see you in Tokyo and all the races. I mean, I watch all the Pro Tour races or World Tour races religiously. I'm lucky here in Norway, they're all broadcast. So we'll be cheering loud. Good luck, man.
Thanks, Devon. Thanks for having me, guys. And thanks to everyone at HopOn, Cycling Canada, and Lexus, and for showing up for the ride. Thanks to everybody. It's been a good ride.
Thanks, guys.